What's up, YouTube friends? So today I'm going to take you on an adventure and I'm going to make some soap. This is a very simple recipe that I'm going to show you. I got this original recipe, the base recipe, off of Becky's Homestead. And I really like this one because it's very few ingredients and they're very easy to find. Now normally I like to do hot process. Any soap recipe can be used either cold processed or hot processed. And the reason why I like hot process is because you could use it right away. But today for this video we're going to do cold process. It's probably the easiest. Now both methods have their pros and cons. Not that they're really cons. Except for the cold process you kind of have to babysit a little bit. And you got to let it set 3 to 6 weeks. Now there are some great teachers here on YouTube that I learned how to make soap from. And one, like I said, was Becky's Homestead. And I really love Soaping 101. If you have a question about soap, she has a video for it. So go check her channels out also. So the things you're going to need for this easy recipe are some coconut oil, some distilled water, some olive oil, and your lye. Now that is the basic recipe. Now for fragrance today I'm going to be doing sandalwood, some lemon, and for the coloring I'm going to use turmeric. Now this should give it a nice yellowy gold color. I've never used turmeric for a colorant before, so we'll find out how it turns out. And just for a little extra added scent, as well as an exfoliant, and this will also give it a nice brown swirl, I have 2 tablespoons of ground cinnamon. Now I actually went ahead and I had some cinnamon sticks that I ground down. I do prefer the smell better than your cinnamon that you get at the store, but you could use that also. Now for the tools I'll be using, this is my soap bucket. I like this one because it does have a spout. It's easier to pour into my molds. I have a metal spoon, and this is a slotted one. I got it at the Goodwill. I also have a silicone spatula that I got at the Goodwill, and that's just to scrape out any of my soap. Now one thing that's really not necessary, you can just use your spoon, but I'm going to use this immersion blender. This is specifically for soap. It's our older one. And this just helps our soap come to trace faster. And you're also going to need a thermometer, especially if you're new to making soap. I have this digital one here. It works great, but you could also just use a candy thermometer. You're going to need a scale. It's very important to get accurate measurements. This is science after all. And you're also going to need some sort of molds. Now 80% of my molds I got at the Goodwill. I got these 2 heart ones there, and they were $1.99 a piece. Now this mold I just got from my friend Rama, and I'm going to try it out today. It makes these cute little flower molds, and they're not as big as the bars that I usually make, so I think these will be great for gifts. And one thing I like about this pan is it has a nice rigid edge. So thank you very much, Rama. Now these 2 molds I got off of Amazon, but they were really inexpensive. I got both of these for $8. And if you don't want to do any of the flower molds, you can just use plain bread mold or a plain muffin tin. I got these ones at the Goodwill. The only bad thing about this one is once I fill it up, it does tend to bend out. So I do have to kind of support it at the edges. And just to be fancy, I use a crinkle cutter to cut my bars. So I went ahead and I already measured out my olive oil and my coconut oil. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw that into my bucket. And now I'm just going to set this off to the side for a minute. In this bowl, I went ahead and I measured out 29.5 ounces of distilled water. It's important to use distilled. You don't want any chlorinated water or anything like that. And now I'm just going to weigh out my lye. Now lye is very dangerous. You do want to wear gloves, eye protection, even crack a window because it will put off some fumes. I have my window open. It's right over here by the sewing machine. And I have a little fan going over in the corner. So with my kitchen scale, I'm going to go ahead and tear out my little container. And we want 11.8 ounces of lye. Now this is definitely not a kid-friendly project, and please use caution when using your lye. So next I'm going to carefully pour my lye into my water, never the other way around. If you pour your water into your lye, it's going to blow up and splatter all over you, and this gets extremely hot. If you do happen to get a little bit to splash on your skin, make sure you have some vinegar nearby, and that'll neutralize that acid. So I'm just going to slowly pour this in and give it a stir. Now this is where you're going to want to open your window and have some good ventilation. You could even do this part outside because it is going to give off some fumes. Now this is already really hot. I can barely keep my hand on the side of this container. So I just want to make sure that my lye is nice and dissolved. So now I'm just going to let this set and cool down. When it does cool down, it will become clear. Right now it's cloudy. And this is where your thermometer comes in handy. So right now it says it's at 175, 176 degrees. I'm going to let that cool down to about 100 degrees. Alright, so this has cooled down enough. So now I'm going to slowly pour my lye solution into my bucket. I'm just going to make sure that I get all of that lye solution out of there. And then we're just going to stir this until it comes up to trace. Now all that means is that it's going to start to thicken up and it's going to look like a thin pudding. So in the beginning here, I just like to use my spoon just to make sure everything's nice and mixed. And then I'll go ahead and I'll switch to my immersion blender. So with the blender, I'm going to just pulse this. You don't want to just crank it on high and keep it on. So I'll just do a little bit and then just stir. And actually at this point I'm going to add my turmeric for coloring. So the recipe says 1 tablespoon of turmeric. This will give it a nice golden color. And I'm just going to mix that in. As you can see, that gave it a nice golden orangey color. Now when our soap sets, that will lighten up. Now you don't have to put any colorant if you don't want to, and you also don't have to put any fragrance. When this does set, it'll be a nice pale, a very light pale yellow color. And I don't know how else to describe it, but it just smells like the nurse's office at school or a nice clean antibiotic smell. I really enjoy the smell of just the plain soap. But today I want to go a little fancy. Now I'm just going to keep mixing this until it comes up to trace, and eventually it is starting to thicken up a little bit, but eventually you'll start to see your stir marks in it, and that's what you want. At that point, that's when I'll add my fragrance. Before adding your fragrance, you just want to make sure that your oil isn't too hot. You really don't have a problem with it with the cold process, but you do with the hot process. Your oils do have a flash point. Your essential oils, your fragrance oils, they do have a flash point, which means they'll just start burning off and you won't have any scent left in your soap. Alright guys, so now I'm at the light trace stage, and this is where I'm going to add my oil as well as my cinnamon. If you can see when I give this a stir, especially with the blender, you can see my trails in the soap. So the original recipe says 3 ounces of fragrance oil, and I just think that's way too much. When I first started making this, I just did 1 ounce, and that's a whole bottle of this. I'm going to put 2 in here. So I have 1 fluid ounce of sandalwood. And then 1 fluid ounce of my lemon. Now you want to be careful because some fragrances can accelerate your trace, and then you'll just have glumpy, lumpy soap. It's still soap, it just doesn't look as pretty. So I'm going to give this a mix. So now I'm just going to add my cinnamon. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons. I'm actually going to take out my blender and I'm just going to mix it with my spatula. I don't want to incorporate it all the way because I want a nice cinnamon swirl in my bars. Now this is getting pretty thick already, so I need to hurry up. So I'm just going to give this a few stirs, make sure it's all underneath the soap. Like I said, that cinnamon is just going to give it a little bit of scent, but it's also going to act as an exfoliant. So now you just want to grab your molds. So I'm going to do my new mold first. So the great thing about the spout is that I can just pour it right in. And you want to go kind of fast because it's starting to thicken up. Now just give it a good pat down. Now after I get my molds filled, I'll come back around and I'll even all of these up. Next one I'm going to do is my loaf pan because I really like to get the bars. And I'm actually going to lean this one up against the other one. Maybe have my blender over here. Doesn't that look like carrot cake or pumpkin bread? It looks good enough to eat. Next I'm going to fill up my heart mold. These heart ones are always good to give away as gifts. If you are using silicone molds, it is a good idea to have something underneath so you can transfer these a little easier. And then I think I have enough to fill a couple of these up anyway. So now I'm just going to go back, and these ones that are overfilled, I'm going to take a little bit out. I don't like them to come all the way to the top because we're going to cover these with cardboard. So I just need to take a little bit of this out. And you can see how thick it's gotten already. It's actually keeping its shape. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cover these with some cardboard. And that's just going to keep the heat in while these saponify. And then I'm actually going to cover these with some towels. We want these nice and insulated. So now I'm just going to let these set for 24 to 48 hours before I try to unmold them. I'll check tomorrow afternoon. It's almost 11 o'clock now, so I'll check tomorrow afternoon. If they're too soft and won't come out of the molds, you want to let them set longer. So I'll bring you back when they're hard enough to come out of the molds. So it is the next day, and actually my memory card was full when I unmolded these, but they came out really easily. And I really didn't get much of a swirl, as much as just blobs, but it still looks good and smells delicious. But I am going to cut this one up for you guys. So I just have my ruler here, and I'm just going to mark every 3/4 of an inch. This last piece will be just a little bit smaller. So now I'm just going to take my crinkle cutter and cut my soap. So first I'm just going to do the end. You can really see the swirl now. And then just every 3/4 of an inch. Oh, that looks beautiful. Now for this end piece, I'm just going to take off a little off the edge. Again. And then cut it in half. It'll be just a little thinner, but that's okay. Now this does have a little bit of potash on the top. I always get this when I make cold processed soap. I think it has a lot to do with my humidity. It has been raining here, and that's one of the reasons why I like to do hot process too. I do not have this problem. It's completely harmless. It just washes right off if you get it wet. And actually, if you're going to give this away for the gifts, the best way to remove that is to get a steamer and just steam the tops of your soaps, and that will just go right away. Like I said, this is just for me, so I'm not really concerned. So now we're just going to let this cure for 3 to 6 weeks. I usually let it cure a month before I'll start using it. The longer the better. And so what I do is I just get some of these plastic needlepoint sheets. Upstairs in my bathroom I have a shelf that's just full of soap, and I put these at the bottom and then lay my soaps on there. That way the air gets around and circulates and dries it out faster. Now this one batch of soap will last me about a year, and actually since I switched to making my own homemade soap, I've been using this for probably 4 or 5 years now. If I go back to the commercial stuff, it just makes my skin itch. I have the same problem with laundry detergent. Well, I hope you give this easy soap recipe a try. If you like this video and want to see more of my videos, go down below and hit that big red subscribe button and give this video a big thumbs up. If you have a question about this video or any of my other videos, or would just like to leave a suggestion for a future upcoming video, leave me a comment. Check out my Etsy link down below if you'd like to support this channel and see what I'm making and selling over there. I'll also have my social media links down below if you'd like to follow me on them. And as always, thanks for watching, happy soap making, and I'll see you next time.